In 1532, in the city of Chambéry, in the French Alps, a fire began to consume the royal chapel in the middle of the night. Flames devoured the stone walls as monks ran desperately through the corridors, but one of them remained standing before a door locked with silver chains, knowing that if he did not act at that exact moment, the most sacred and controversial object in Christian history would be reduced to ashes forever. Inside that protected chamber lay the Shroud of Turin, the cloth that supposedly wrapped the body of Christ after the crucifixion. And that monk was about to make a decision that would change his life and the destiny of millions of believers for centuries to come. The story of the Shroud of Turin did not begin on that night of fire and desperation. It reaches back through centuries of silence, mystery, and hidden devotion, crossing crusades, persecutions, and religious wars that shaped medieval Europe. The linen cloth, measuring approximately 4.5 meters long by 1 meter wide, bears the faint image of a man who suffered tortures consistent with Roman crucifixion, marks of scourging, punctures in the wrists and feet, and a crown of thorns that tore into the scalp. But what makes this object truly extraordinary is not only the visible wounds, but the fact that the image was not painted, drawn, or imprinted by human hands. It is a negative photographic image, something humanity would only understand more than 700 years later, with the invention of photography in the 19th century. The first reliable records of the shroud appear in the 14th century, when the noble French family of de Charny began displaying it publicly in Liray, immediately provoking conflict with local church authorities who questioned its authenticity. The church, cautious amid the many false relics circulating throughout medieval Europe, adopted an ambiguous stance, neither fully condemning nor fully endorsing the object. But popular devotion was uncontrollable. Pilgrims traveled hundreds of kilometers to contemplate that serene yet tormented face imprinted on the cloth, seeking healing, miracles, and a tangible connection to the most sacred moment in Christian history. The de Charny family guarded the shroud as their greatest treasure, but also as a heavy burden, for possessing such a relic meant living under constant threat of theft, looting, and political dispute. It was in 1532 that fate tested the faith of those guardians. On the night of December 3rd to 4th, a fire of unknown origin began in the sacristy of the Sainte-Chapelle of Chambéry, where the shroud was kept inside an ornate silver reliquary, protected by grills and chains. The flames spread with terrifying speed, fed by ancient wood and the tapestries that adorned the sanctuary. The monks tried to fight the fire with buckets of water, but it was useless. The heat grew so intense that the silver of the reliquary began to melt, dripping molten metal onto the folded cloth inside. It was then that a monk named Pussod made the decision that would define the rest of his life. Ignoring the cries of his brothers who begged him to flee while there was still time, he grabbed an iron bar and began striking the chains that protected the reliquary. After several desperate blows, the chains broke, and Guillaume managed to tear the still-smoking reliquary from the altar. His hands burned as he touched the overheated metal, his skin sticking to the molten silver, but he did not let go. He carried the heavy object through black smoke and collapsing burning beams, stumbling on the stone steps, choking, yet always moving forward. When he finally emerged from the ruined chapel, he collapsed in the snow-covered courtyard, still clutching the reliquary. The other monks rushed to help him, but Guillaume had only one concern: to open the reliquary immediately and see whether the shroud had survived. When they finally forced open the container, deformed by heat, they found the cloth partially damaged. The molten silver had burned the linen in several places, leaving symmetrical marks that are still visible today. But the image of the face remained intact, as if an invisible force had protected it from the fire. Guillaume Pussod spent the following months recovering. His hands were permanently deformed by the burns, and he was never again able to perform the manual tasks that had once been part of his monastic routine. But he never complained. In monastery records, another monk noted that Guillaume claimed to have felt a presence with him inside the burning chapel, a force that guided his steps and gave him courage when he was about to give up. He spent the rest of his days in silent prayer, contemplating the shroud he had saved, and died in peace 20 years later, carrying with him the secret of that mysterious night. The lesson Guillaume left behind is not written in ancient parchments or elaborate theological treatises. It is imprinted on his burned hands, on his willingness to risk everything for something that transcended his own life. He teaches us that true faith is not revealed in beautiful words or public gestures of piety, but in moments of absolute darkness when we are called to act without any guarantee of reward, recognition, or even survival. Guillaume did not save the shroud to gain fame or privilege. He saved it because, in that crucial moment, he understood that some treasures of the human spirit are worth more than personal preservation, that there are truths greater than our fear, and that the legacy we leave for future generations is built through acts of silent courage that may never be fully recognized. And if you feel that this story touches something deep within your own spiritual journey, leave the word guardian in the comments so I know you understood its meaning. And if you are not yet part of this community of explorers of sacred routes, click subscribe. Many more extraordinary stories are waiting to be revealed. The Shroud of Turin survived that fire, just as it survived wars, revolutions, and the relentless skepticism of the modern age. Today it is kept in the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Turin, protected by advanced technology and displayed only on rare special occasions. Scientists from around the world have examined it with the most sophisticated equipment available, and the mystery only deepens. Carbon-14 dating performed in 1988 suggested the cloth was medieval, but later studies questioned that conclusion, pointing out that the sample tested may have been contaminated by ancient restorations or by the fire of 1532 itself. More recent analyses of the fibers, the pollen found on the cloth, and the properties of the image have revealed characteristics that defy simple explanations. The image exists only on the most superficial fibers of the linen, with a depth of just a few microfibers, something that cannot be reproduced even with contemporary technology. There are no traces of pigments, dyes, or any chemical substance that could explain the formation of the image. But perhaps the true miracle of the shroud lies not in scientific analysis or debates over authenticity. The miracle lies in how this object has inspired countless people over the centuries to reflect on suffering, sacrifice, and redemption. It lies in the gaze of Guillaume Pussod when he decided it was worth burning his hands to save a piece of cloth. It lies in the faith of those who travel from distant continents to contemplate it for just a few moments. And it lies in the silent question it asks us. What would you be willing to sacrifice for what you believe in? For what you consider sacred? For what transcends your individual existence? Each of us, at some point in our journey, is called to decide whether we will remain passive spectators or whether we will have the courage to step into the smoke, face fear, and save what truly matters. Guillaume Pussod never imagined that his act of courage would be remembered centuries later. He did not act thinking of posterity, but driven by a deep conviction that burned hotter than the flames around him. And that is precisely the nature of truly sacred acts. They do not seek recognition, they do not calculate rewards, they do not measure consequences. They simply happen when the human soul encounters something greater than itself and decides to act. Today, when you face the challenges of your own life, when you are called to make difficult decisions, remember the monk who walked into the fire. Remember that true faith is not the absence of fear, but the courage to act despite it. That the legacy we leave is not found in the words we speak, but in the choices we make when no one is watching. And that the most sacred objects we guard are not made of silver or gold, but of convictions we are willing to defend even when everything around us is in flames. If this story awakened something within you, if you felt the presence of something greater than all of us, show it by subscribing to this channel. Leave a like so the algorithm can share these stories with more people who seek meaning and mystery. Comment Guardian if you understood the profound lesson Guillaume left us. And share this video with someone who needs to hear that there are still truths worth defending, mysteries worth exploring, and sacred routes worth walking. Because in the end, we are all guardians of something. The question is, do you know what you are protecting? And more importantly, would you be willing to burn your hands to save it? See you on the next sacred route.